Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to week 1 of storytelling. Good stories take time to create, whether we are creating stories that are original or retelling stories that we already know. Artists use storyboards to help them plan out stories. A storyboard is a graphic representation of how your story is going to unfold, scene by scene. In order to make a good storyboard, you don't need a lot of detail, just some basic illustrations and descriptions of what each scene is going to be. Think of a storyboard almost like a comic book-like rough sketch of what each scene is going to be. We're going to use our storyboards as a draft for our final stories that we'll create into a final product next week. On a storyboard, the boxes represent the scenes of the story. I've given you 3 boxes in each section to help you describe and show what the plot of your story will be. Just like a writer, an artist needs to think about the structure of a story when they're creating a storyboard. We'll be using a story arc or a narrative arc to help us organize our stories today. On our storyboards, we're thinking about the 3 main parts of a story arc. The 3 main parts of a story arc are the exposition, the climax, and the resolution. In the exposition of a story, we're introducing the main characters and the main setting of the story. In the climax, we're thinking about the main problem that the character faces in the story. This is also where the most action happens in the story. And finally, in the resolution of the story, we are telling how the problem has been solved or how the character has changed by the end of the story. I am going to create a storyboard for the nursery rhyme The Itsy Bitsy Spider as an example for you today. You can find a printable version of the worksheet that I am using included with the art menu for this week, or feel free to create your own in this format on a separate sheet of paper. In the exposition of the Itsy Bitsy Spider, we are introduced to our main character, which is Itsy Bitsy, and we know that in the beginning of the story, they're climbing up the water spout. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm going to keep my illustrations and my descriptions really simple because this is just a plan of what my final story is going to look like. So in the first scene of my story, I'm going to decide where Itsy Bitsy is climbing up the water spout. In my version of the Itsy Bitsy Spider, I want Itsy Bitsy to be in a garden. Now that I've created an image of Itsy in the garden, I need to also create a description. Think of your descriptions as a caption for your image. So the caption or description for my first scene would be Itsy in the garden. Now I can think about my next scene. We know that in the beginning of the story, Itsy needs to make it up the water spout. So instead of jumping right ahead, I'm going to split up that scene of Itsy seeing the water spout and then climbing up it. In my version of the Itsy Bitsy Spider, I want Itsy to be climbing up the spout of a watering can. So for my second scene, I'm going to add a description as Itsy walks towards the spout. And now I can create the last scene of the beginning of the story, which is Itzy climbing up the spout. So my final caption can be Itzy climbs up the spout. Next, I can start thinking about the climax or the problem that Itzy faces in this story. We know from the nursery rhyme that the big problem Itzy faces is that it begins to rain and she gets washed out from the spout. So for the climax scenes of my nursery rhyme, I'm going to show it raining, Itzy getting scared because the watering can is starting to overflow, and finally Itzy being washed out and pushed back onto the ground. Lastly, the resolution of the Itsy Bitsy Spider, or the way that the problem is solved in the story, is that the sun comes back out and dries up all the rain so that Itsy can climb back up the spout again. So for my illustrations and descriptions, I'm going to draw and describe the sun coming back out, drying up all the rain, and then my last scene will be Itsy climbing back up the watering can again. So now my storyboard is complete and I feel like I have a very solid plan to make a final product next week. I am super excited to see all the retold and original stories that you guys decide to share with me this week, and I'm even more excited for all the final products next week. There are so many cool options that I have to share with you next week, so have fun with this, and I can't wait to see what you do. Talk to you soon.